All right, you guys, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, the number one place to discover the people, the ideas, and strategies that help you bring and build a life and also a business that actually works for you. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And if this is the first time that you are tuning in, this is the show for anyone that feels stuck between success and satisfaction, or people that are looking good on paper but still feel overwhelmed, burned out, or unsure of what is next. And that's exactly why today's episode and guest actually matters. So if you've ever felt like your career is probably moving fast and is even faster, but your inner peace is stuck in traffic,
Mm.
then today's conversation will definitely hit home. But before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to the Online Prosperity Show on whichever platform that you're watching or listening to this on, because every episode is going to be bringing you exclusive insights from people who are actually solving real problems and creating meaningful change out there. Now, like I said, I'm really excited about today's guest, Colin C. Thompson. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. And Mr. Prosper, here's the thing. Your mind, and you know this, your mind can be your absolute best friend, or it can be absolutely your worst enemy. And today we want to talk about how to make sure your mind is your BFF. FFFF.
Absolutely. Now, I'm really excited about this. And obviously, when you are friends with the one thing that you're constantly with all the time, guess what happens? It starts working for you, not against you. Now, you might be surprised. Why is Colin C. Thompson talking like this? Well, he is the founder of Oligai, and he's a keynote speaker, life coach, and somebody who actually helps mid-career professionals strengthen their mental fitness and find harmony in chaos. And obviously, he spent years helping people do something that a lot of professionals struggle with, which is keeping their mind strong when life gets complicated. And as he has already alluded to, when your mind is your best friend, guess what? You can actually accomplish so many more things because it's not working against you. So through coaching, workshops, and also keynotes that he does around the world, he actually helps people overcome internal obstacles that he actually calls saboteurs, and he helps them replace them with a stronger, clearer mental framework. So today we're going to explore how somebody actually goes from obviously navigating their own challenges to then, hey, he's now helping others be, do, and have a happier existence. Now, Colin C. Thompson, I could go on and talk about things I'm not even qualified to talk about. One thing that I discovered when we started, talking, is that every single year you've replaced cake for a run when it comes to your birthday. Tell us a little bit about how you came around to that, and then we can get started with the episode.
Absolutely. And we're talking about mental fitness. And my birthday run started in 2000 and let me get this correctly, in 2014. Nope, that's not correct. It started in let's just say started in 2010. I believe I was turning 35 years old, and being a lifelong athlete, marathons, triathlons, Hall of Fame career in collegiate wrestling, I was very much wanted a new challenge. So at the time I was living in Shenzhen, China. I believe I was 34, 35 years old, and I noticed something that happens to so many of us. We slow down. We're not able to do the things we could do when we were younger, be it from an athletic standpoint, be it from a mindset standpoint, beat it from a going out and drinking alcohol all night standpoint, waking up and being totally exhausted, as opposed to 20 that can drink all night and have no lingering effects. When I turned 35, I wrongly said, I need to prove to myself that I still got it. Right? I still got it. Colin Thompson has not slowed down whatsoever. So I decided from every year on my birthday, I'm going to run my age in miles in 24 hours. I'm going to start at midnight. Um, the moment my birthday starts to 11:59 on my birthday, and I'm going to run my age in miles. Now, my first time doing it, I was 35 years old. And here's the thing, that is August 13th in Shenzhen, China, where it is approximately, I'm going to say 30 degrees, 30 degrees Celsius. It is in the 90s Fahrenheit. It is hot. It is hot. But me being me, I put the challenge out there, and I was able to succeed in my birthday run, the first year and subsequent years. And Mr. Prosper, here's the funny thing. I've been doing that run on and off for the past 18 years. And I recall now, last time I successfully completed it, it was when I turned 50. That was 50 miles in one in 24 hours. And I recall when I was doing 35 miles in 24 hours, how I thought that was the toughest thing in my life. And I've learned every year, you know what? Every year we get tougher and we get tougher. And it's a mindset thing. And again, it's a mindset thing. And every year is the toughest mental and physical thing I've ever done, because every year it gets harder. But knowing I completed it the year before gives me the muscle memory to know I can do it again, even though I failed to do it in 24 hours several times, several times. But as we go through life, what can we learn from these positive failures, which I like to say? So that birthday run, the birthday run every year is something that has now become a part of who I am. My friends, my family, people across the globe. One year we had 50 people in 21 different cities doing it with me. So it's become quite a movement. I call it a crusade, and a crusade not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, because the mental aspect of it is much more difficult than the physical aspect, especially knowing that you must go endure something that really, really breaks you down and you hate. Several years I hated doing it, but I felt I had to do it, even though that's the wrong mindset to have. So thanks for opening the session with that wonderful, terrible, I'm sorry, terrible, wonderful thing I do every year.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for obviously, opening us up with that, because it really shows us the kind of person that you are and the kind of person you are becoming. Because each year, like you say, is getting harder. And obviously, maybe by the time everybody then shows up for your birthday party, you're already tired and they think, oh, he's getting old. But you've already done and accomplished whatever it is that you are, hoping to get. But you did mention that before age 35, you had such a busy life where all of these things were happening and you refused to be defined by the age that you were becoming at that particular time. Could you just give us a glimpse of what life was like for Colin C. Thompson, before age 35?
Yeah, so let me back up to um share the story. My parents were double immigrants. My parents left the tiny, tiny island, wonderful island of Jamaica, in I want to say the first time in 1972. And they went from the small, very, very warm island of Jamaica to the very, very large and very, very cold country of Canada. Ouch. I came out, I say ouch because it's cold. It's cold. I came out in Canada in 1973, and then we immigrated again from Canada to the United States in 1980. When I arrived 19 in the United States, I was roughly 7 years old enough to notice things. And the first thing that I noticed, Mr. Prosper, was black. And I say that because in Canada, I was Canadian. I was a person. We had neighbors. We had white neighbors, black neighbors, Indian neighbors. We were just people. But once we got into the U.S., it was okay. If you're black, don't go here, don't go there, don't do this, don't do that. But here's the thing: if you're black, don't believe you can. Don't
Mm.
believe you can accomplish this. Don't believe you can get better. Don't believe you can blah 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 blah. And my parents did not raise us like that. So inside our house, it was Jamaican. And my parents again immigrated from Jamaica to Canada to the US. Do you know how hard that is to do? So in our household is you're black, you can do whatever you want. It's called the immigrant mindset, which is very, very real, right? You work so hard to get from your homeland where it's very, very dire to somewhere else. Once you get there, you're gonna make it work and you're gonna bring your family over. So we never had that mindset. So growing up, I always had a passion for helping my fellow black folk, black people, get over what we call it PTSD, post
Mm.
traumatic slavery disease. And what it was, if you grew up black in the United States, you're born with a governor on your mindset. Again, you can't accomplish, you can't do that. So I always had a habit of telling black people, actually anybody, you can do more, you can succeed. And then with that mindset, my entire family almost went to Howard University, HBCU. And once I got there in 1991, oh my gosh, knowledge of self, learning the true history of black people, it just opened my mind up. Now, to be honest, I only was able to get into Howard University for two reasons. One, I had two sisters and two brothers who were going there. Two brother-in-laws who went there, so it was like a family thing. My grades were terrible from high school because I was really focused on sports. So lucky to get to Howard on a wrestling scholarship. And sometimes certain schools athletes don't have to meet all the academic requirements. And I'm very, very thankful for that because if not, I would not have had opportunity to go to Howard. So went to Howard, learn more about myself. As it comes to sports, I was on the wrestling team. We became champions of our conference in 1995. Um, in 2022, that team was inducted into the Howard University Hall of Fame. Now, I say that to say that I was very much into sports. When I graduated, however, I want to identify another personality, not just for my athletic abilities, but now more for my smarts, my academic abilities. So I went into the workforce. I went to the workforce in 1995, doing IT consulting and whatnot. Now I'm gonna fast forward throughout the years. Over the years, I always tried to maintain my athletic ability. In, I believe, 1997, my sister invited us to run the Susan K. Broman breast cancer. My mother died of cancer, so we all joined together to do that. And that was the first 5K I ever ran. And I'll tell you something that I learned, not just for running, but for being able to listen to our elders. This was my first 5K race in Washington, D.C. And I remember the gun went off. I am all of 22 years old. The gun went off and I am rolling. I'm going to do good, blah, blah, blah. I remember this black gentleman, older man, very much older than me, said, "Young man, slow down. It's a long race." In my mind, I'm like, you don't know who you're talking to. I'm Colin C. Thompson. I'm about to get this in. Mr. Prosper, 20 minutes later, I am dying out there. I am walking, right? And who comes running beside me? That same old man.
Oh
He looks
man.
at me and gives me a thumbs up, right? And that's when I was like, wow, I have so much more to learn. So as I got older, I went from 5Ks to 10Ks to marathons. So by the time I got to Shenzhen, China, I was a seasoned runner, but I wasn't running as fast as I could before. And if you're a lifelong athlete, you always try to maintain. I want to weigh the same weight I weighed when I was 21. You can't do that. Life is you can't go back, right? A lot of my clients say, you know what, I want to go back to the energy I had when I was 30. I want to go back to the willingness to never give up when I was 30. And you can't go back, right? Don't try to be somebody from the past. Be who you are today. So that's why I said earlier, when I wanted to prove I still had it, that was a very much wrong mindset, right? Because it's very dangerous trying to go back and relive the past. So my mindset going into it wrongly was, I want to do this to prove to myself that I still have it, as opposed to saying, I want to do this to enjoy the journey. I want to do this to see something different. So that's the background of who I was when I was 31, and I was luckily able to get. Let me share this. I was able to get to China with IBM. And I'll tell you why. In 2023, while working at Howard University, I decided to get my MBA, which is very, very important because I realized that to get to the next level in my career, in my life, I had to sort of shake up what I was doing. I had a very good job, but working at Howard University, and they had a thing called tuition remission, right? Which means as you work there, they'll cover part of your tuition. So I worked full time, school part time for 3.5 years, and when I interviewed before graduation, I told every company, I want to go work overseas. Okay. If you can't get me overseas, don't even try it. And IBM said, if you come into this leadership program, we should be able to get you overseas. And I joined IBM in 2006, and they got me overseas in 2007. I landed in Shenzhen, China, literally December 31st, 2007. And the first day I met my manager here in China, I said to him, I said, my goal is at the end of this 6 month rotation, you offer me a full time job to stay here. And
Right.
he did that. And the reason that was important to me was because growing up in the United States, I very much had the American mindset. And I remember my father telling me, become a global citizen. So I wanted to get more experience, not just traveling abroad for holiday, but living abroad, hearing different stories, sharing my stories. So by the time I got there and did my first birthday run, and I think it was 2009, I was ready for a new experience and to really see what I was really made of, both physically and mentally.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for obviously giving us, a
The
bit
full
of.
story.
That's all right. No, I just wanted to take us back a little bit, for some people that might not have had the opportunity of, well-rounded parents allowing them to actually go out and do certain things. Just maybe can you touch up on how important that is? Because you did mention that everybody else around you was working around a ceiling that if you're a certain type of person, a certain type of race, you cannot go or be or do certain types of things. Whereas when you're in your household, your parents would tell you, go do these things. And, obviously that had so much to do with where you are now because your parents would have told you to be a global citizen.
Absolutely. And you start off by saying when you're in an environment where your parents aren't doing that. And unfortunately, that's a lot of young African Americans in the United States are in that sort of environment, which is why it's very important to have a mentor. So, a lot of kids, teenagers don't really listen to our parents. My parents were able to create the environment where I could make mistakes and be okay. But where I gotta say, where I found some of my mentors was church, right? Seeing the pastor up there, being able to say things, and quite frankly, it wasn't the words so much, but just seeing him really motivate and control the crowd like that, by what he's saying, and help me realize what we say is very important. So fellow teenagers, it was really their mentors. We would go to the YMCA and we had played Pop Warner football, and it was our coaches who really mentored us. So being able to be open to mentorship, that's what really helped these kids, because these kids, a lot of them didn't have a strong man in their life. So being able to go to your football coach, your basketball coach, and them giving you messages, them giving you positive, them hugging you, right? So if the parent environment doesn't give that, luckily a lot of times it does come through mentorship. It does come through teamwork, joining teams, and understanding how important that team environment is. So I got to say, it's making sure that that you're able to be mentored and you have mentors around has a very, very big impact if the home environment doesn't support that.
Absolutely. And I really like that wholesome, look at everything else that, created the person that you are now. So pretty much after IBM, you would have worked in that sort of industry. Maybe you can walk us through up until you then decided I am going to be coaching and teaching other people, how to be, do, and have a happy existence.
Absolutely. And that goes back to university when I pledged my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the the oldest and first Black Greek led fraternity. Um, Once you become a member, you have a mandate for community service. You have a mandate to support the community. And due to that, you get into a habit of saying, how can I help? How can I be of service? So when I left the United States and went to China with IBM, I was I had a double MBA in e-business, electronic business, and supply chain. I came to Shenzhen to help start a new business line. I was very, very fresh, very, very young in terms of IBM. IBM is hundreds of years, not hundreds, but over 100 years. And their workforce was older. So me going there at the age of 34, I was very, very young, very, very new. And being in a different country, there was a lot of friction because when I went there as a new young manager, and by the way, the only foreign manager there, I went there with the mindset of, I'm going to show you how we do it where I come from, as opposed to being open, understanding how you do it here first. It's a different culture, a totally, totally different way of working. I'll share with you a story. At lunchtime, in IBM, and not at IBM, but in a lot of companies, organizations here in China, at lunchtime, you go eat lunch at 11:30, you finish eating lunch at 12:15, then from 12:15 to 1:30, you nap, you sleep. And that totally, oh, what are you talking about? So you have these 2 hours, basically no work getting done. And here I am at 1 o'clock wanting to meet, and I can't call meetings, anything, because people are literally sleeping on the job. So that was the first thing I tried to change, right? I tried to change that. And due to that, it caused a lot of challenges in the way I led as a manager. Fast forward, I left Shenzhen in 2010 to come to Shanghai to work in a different business line where I wasn't leading. When I wasn't leading, I had an opportunity to observe. Now, at that point, I'd been with IBM in China for about 4 years. So I was then asked to, in addition to my daily job, to take on what we call blue core coaching. And in the coaching, since I knew the Chinese way of working and the Western way of working, my role there was to coach our new Chinese leaders before they went to Europe or went to the US. And as the US leaders came here, coach them on how to best manage their teams in this environment. Because I had done that and first failed and then succeeded. So that's where I first started coaching. And I found that to be very, very different. And I mean that if you had asked me in 2012, what does a coach do, and life coach, career coach, I would have said, dude, just work, right? You do it by experiencing it, no need to coach. But when I first started coaching young leaders and understanding their challenges, and then helping them understand different ways of communicating, different ways of getting the motivating the team, and then 4 months later they come back and say, Colin, what you said to me changed my career or changed my life. That's when I said this coaching thing has something. Now, one of the challenges that a lot of coaches face when they're coaching in an organization is you want to your mandate is to coach this person to being more valuable in the workplace. Okay, more valuable in the workplace. Even if, as you learn more about that person, you can see that that work environment may not be what's best for that person. You can't tell the person, hey, maybe you want to leave. You can't. You cannot do that. So there was still a governor or limit of how effective you can be as a coach in an organization. So in 2018, I left IBM and opened up my own coaching practice, and I've been running now for 6 years. 6 years? No, oh my god, 8 years since, and I've been able now to, what I like to say, impact the lives of so many people. I think in a positive way, but more importantly, those people have impacted my life in a positive way because the way what I feel as far as appreciation for them trusting me to help them improve their lives is priceless.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for opening us up with that as well, because now it really shows us that sort of transition, because you would have noticed, that gap that somebody like yourself would feel, because you had already experienced the Chinese way of working, and also the Western way of working. But now that you've mentioned that, it's quite funny to think that so much production is done in China, yet they still have 2 to 3 hours of them not doing anything throughout the day. There must be a lot of work that happens in the time that they are, viable, right?
Absolutely. And so there's two environments, right? There's a typical business environment, business office, and then there's manufacturing, which is totally different. In manufacturing, you want to get every ounce of work out of individuals. And with IBM, we had a manufacturing side as well. So when
Right.
I first saw that, I was shocked because and if you think about it, it's very well, I don't want to say it's very impressive because now it's not so much impressive. When I first saw the fact that the line workers, they live in the factory. What I mean is, yeah, building A is the factory. Across the street are the dorms, and you're in this little gated compound, right? And they do it such that employees don't leave the compound. You have a shopping mall, you have McDonald's, you have everything you have so people don't leave because you want to get the work out of them. And you have 6 to 8 people in one dormitory room. They just work 6 days a week, so it's very much it's efficient, but it's not necessarily what's best for anybody working there on a day to day because they want to eke out every bit of time online, as opposed to letting people have time off. And most people, it's a migrant town, right? So most people leave their city and go to Shenzhen, work for 11 months a year. Chinese New Year, they go home for 3 weeks and they come back, and that's it. Very few holidays, so it's not the best work environment, but it was something that was what I thought was impressed when I first saw it. But I was thinking about the production side of it and not the human side of it. So very, very, very different. But in the business office, the folks took naps, which I got to understand, made sense. But here's the other thing, Mr. Prosper. Um, at 5 o'clock or 4:45, everybody's gone, and I'm like, where'd everybody go? And I'm like, where I come from in the U.S., you work late if need be, but at that time in that office, that didn't happen. And the reason was, and I didn't learn this till somebody broke it down to me. The reason was the shuttle bus leaves at 5:15, and if you miss the shuttle bus, you got to find your own way home. So most employees took a bus from the office into the city where they live. In the morning, same thing. So if you missed that shuttle bus, you had to find your own way home. So I've been provided transportation to and from work. So that was very, very different. I had to understand what life was like in that um, software 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 manufacturing environment.
Absolutely.
Very,
Well,
very different.
this actually gives us a bit of perspective. Now, the thing that you work with is you are, or you talk a lot about mental fitness and overcoming
Yes.
internal saboteurs. Now, from what you're saying, there's a lot that is coming from the external before it even hits the internal. Because if you say miss that bus, then that means you're gonna have to figure out your life and things of that nature. How were you navigating all of this and helping people really strengthen their mental fitness? Moving forward.
Yeah, and back in 2007 through 2014, I could say I wasn't helping people. I was still fighting it. I was still saying there's a different way to do that. But once I got my first taste of coaching and
Mhm.
seeing how it really helped people, that's when I started saying, okay, what more can I do to help people? I'm going to say improve their lives. That's very, very broad, very, very broad, but it's very, very real because improving your life can happen in several different ways. It could be in your relationship, how you communicate, how you live in yourself, how much money you earn, your career, however you define improving your life, it's up to the individual. So I can say that after 2014, when I first started coaching, that's when I really saw the impact. When we talk about mental fitness, and mental fitness is very simple, our ability to maintain a positive mindset over a negative mindset as we go through the ups and downs of life. I learned that mindset during COVID, actually before COVID in 2019, when I learned about positive intelligence. And that's when I leaned in and understood that we all have these inner voices that talk to us, right? We've all heard the old the old I heard it was an Indian proverb, then I heard it was Irish proverb, and we've all heard the same thing. Somebody said, um, granddaddy, I feel like I have these two sides in my body, one positive and one negative. Um, which one is going to which one's going to be louder? An old man said, the one you feed the most, right? Meaning the more you feed the negative side, it's going to be stronger. The more you feed the positive side, it's going to be stronger. So that means we all have these inner voices. We call the inner voices our saboteurs because our saboteurs are many versions of us telling us all these beautiful, wonderful lies. Like, you can't do it. You're not strong enough. They can do it, but you can't do it, right? You're going to fail. And for some reason, we've gone up with these saboteurs. So they're very, very strong. And we think we need them. One of the biggest lies is, I need pressure to succeed, right? I work better under pressure, which is a big saboteur lie, as opposed to our sage mindset, which is all about positivity, all about support, all about empathy. So now I'm in a position where I really focus on people first understanding those inner voices, understanding those saboteurs, because unless you know you're being saboteured, you think it's normal. You think this is who you are, and it's not who you are. You have that inside you, but it's not who you are. So I hope that does answer your question about how I talk about folks and really help them understand their saboteurs in order for them to be able to build up and maintain their mental fitness.
Absolutely. And I think that just drives us straight into the core of what it is that you actually do and help people. Because you've mentioned, obviously, I think when I was growing up, there was a cartoon that would have a little angel on one side and a little
Yeah, yeah,
devil on the other side. And then, be telling you, oh, go and take that thing from your friend and don't worry
yes,
about it. And the other one is saying, no, don't do that. You don't want to do that to your friend. What if that was you and things of that nature? And then, there was that back and forth and things of that nature. But I find that most of those things that are words in our heads have been installed there, usually by the people around us. Just like a language or like a safety mechanism and things of that nature. How do then people know how to distinguish, not necessarily which is good or bad, or which way to proceed based on the
right.
fact that it's always been like this? We've always been told to act like this, and that's how everybody else around us performs.
Right. So you had a very good point. Most of these inner voices, I'm going to say inner voices, so it's much
Yep.
easier to understand saboteurs. Most of our inner voices start from our childhood,
Right.
and they're part of our survival mode. And it really starts inside the household. So if you were raised in a house where your parents are very strict on how you clean your room, okay? They come in there and everything must be very clean. If it's not clean, they're going to yell at you, you're going to do it again. You may soon develop the habit of being what we call a stickler, being very concise on how you clean up. Everything must be in place. And that may carry along with you into your preteen, into your teenagers, into your adult years. Everything. So when you're working, if things aren't precise, it makes you frustrated. If people can't do things a certain way, it makes you frustrated. Now that's because when you were a child, you wanted to get your parents' acceptance. Hey, good job, you did great. So you make sure every T was crossed, every I was dotted, right? The pillow's in the right place, the bed is made up perfectly, and you continue that because you want to get that you did great, and that then becomes a side of you. As you get older, so that was a very positive habit you had. Where it gets dangerous is where you feel the need, you must do that, right? It no longer becomes a habit. Well, it no longer becomes you doing it because you want to be neat and tidy. You must do it, right? And not only must you do it, if you don't do it, you have negative emotions. I'm not, I'm not good enough. I'm not doing what I need to be doing. And you also demand that from your spouse, your friends, and it becomes a bit what we call a bit heavy. So again, these come from our childhood. Now, the question was, how do you then start to shift and lower the voice of your saboteur and bring the more positive voice up? That is a part where it's very, very difficult. But the first step is understanding. The first step is being able to recognize when you're being triggered, because these inner voices trigger us, right? Trigger us by saying you can't, don't stop. So when you start recognizing when your saboteur shows up, that's all you do first. Do not try to change behavior. And I'll tell you what I mean. And you may have experienced Mr. Prosper. So a lot of times, I'm going to use a New Year's resolution because people can resonate with New Year's resolution. A lot of times, people say, "My New Year's resolution is I'm going to I'm going to go to the gym and get in better shape." Okay, on January 1 or January 2, you go to the gym and you go there for an hour and you go hard, pump, 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 and you're going to go 5 days a week. Well, you know what? 3 weeks later, you stopped because you tried too hard, right? However, had you said, I'm going to go the first day and I'm going to go maybe the next week. If you start slow sometimes, you build momentum. So with my clients, when my clients say, I have this, my spouse and well, I have this, I have trouble communicating and sharing my emotions. I get mad and I want to stop doing that. And I say, okay, where do you want to start? They may say, you know what, my spouse and I argue a lot. I want to work on not getting upset by my spouse. I'll say, wait a second, you have yet to build up your strengths to do that, right? So if you're going to run a 5K race, day one of training, you don't run 5K, right? Day one training, you run 2 laps. So when we want to improve how we communicate with our spouse, our mental fitness is just like our physical fitness. It must be built up. So I'll say, do not start with the biggest challenge you have, right? If you want to improve your ability, don't get mad when you're driving to work. When you're driving to work, if somebody cuts you off or does anything, don't get mad there. And once you're able to handle road rage, then move on to something else. And maybe 6, 7 months later, you can take on how you and your spouse communicate. So it's very important as we want to make a shift, we don't go too big. You must take your time and build up your mental fitness just like you would do your physical fitness.
I like that because so many people look at, if they want to change, they're looking at, a point of reference. So they might look at somebody who's already accomplished in whatever change that they want to change, and they
Mhm.
automatically want to hit that stride immediately, whereas they don't notice, wait a minute, there's layers and years and practices and things that people need to do in order to get started. Because if the first step is too high, then that would actually derail your strategy. So what would you recommend to be the first step that somebody starts with if they're going to be on this journey, so that they're not reaching far too high enough to discourage themselves later on?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely correct in that when people decide to make a change, it's usually because something major happened. And because of that major thing, they want to then address that major thing, which may not be the best way to go. So to answer your question, the first thing is understanding when you get triggered, right? When you get triggered. So a trigger makes us act a certain way. We act a certain way to stimuli, and typically we act in a negative way. But you want to understand when you're calm and you interact with a person, place, or thing, and then you end up being going to a negative space, being angry, being sad. What is it that caused that change of emotion? Understand what that trigger is. Don't try to stop it, right? But understand, for example, if you go to a supermarket and you see a parking spot, and before you turn in, somebody else quickly turns in, and you get mad, right? What is it about that triggered you? Is it the fact that somebody took that parking spot and you thought it was your parking spot? Is the fact that you're trying to get into the store really, really fast and now they're delaying you? What is it about it that triggered you? Because what you think it may have been a trigger might not be it. For example, if somebody, same scenario, somebody takes a parking spot, some people may say, well, you're mad because somebody got it before you got it. But in your mind is your daughter's at home sick. You want to get her medication. So the trigger is somebody delaying me from taking care of my daughter, right? So the first thing is to understand what that trigger is. Now, here's the thing is a lot of times people though don't know how to do that. And that's where coaching comes in. Because with coaching, you can then help the person reflect on what happened and really break it down frame by frame by frame by frame by frame. Because if you look at it like islands, the first island is maybe irritation. It could be frustration, then irritation, then reaction, right? So understanding what is the trigger and how do you go from a calm mindset to being upset. So the first step is really understanding what that trigger is.
Absolutely. So that actually then looks like introspection because you got to know yourself enough to separate what is happening externally to point it back at yourself. Because I think that will be the hardest part, where some people would just want to blame the other person for being irrational. You saw me indicating that meant that parking spot was mine. And so you did it, you spited me. So it is your fault. Like that introspection now.
Yes, and the challenge is, the challenge is, it's almost impossible to have introspection when you're upset.
Mm.
Almost impossible to have introspection when you're upset. You can be upset with yourself or somebody else, but it's always almost possible to have that moment of clarity during. And so people go on and move to the next thing, but never just sit back and reflect. And I tell folks two things: when you reflect, using blameless discernment. So blameless discernment is where you're not judging. You're not saying whose fault it is. You're just saying, you know what, I got upset because somebody took my parking spot. Let me just not judge and look at why that happened. And once you recognize you got upset, then saying, okay, and this is the important piece here. Being able to sit down and be mindful of what's going to happen the next time you do it. So next time you do it, you want to reflect on what took place and see yourself taking a different reaction. So next time you go to the store and someone takes a parking spot after you practiced a change of behavior, when they see it, not getting upset and it's carrying on. Now, Mr. Prosper, the truth is you can sit down and reflect and visualize the next time, not upset, not upset, not upset, not upset. Okay, that's Tuesday. Not upset, not upset. Next Monday when it happens, you're gonna get upset again. You're gonna get upset again because it takes time, right? It takes time. But you must reflect again and say, why wasn't I able to use why wasn't I able to use my visualization to help me? So it's gonna take a few times before you're able to actually change the behavior. But again, I'm not trying to push coaching, but coaching helps you to be mindful of an action and then be accountable to lean in and make sure you're taking that change of behavior.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, there has to be a certain type of person or types of people that you obviously like working with. Who do you help get rid of these saboteurs?
Yeah. So you mentioned the kind of person I like working with. Um, I don't look at it like that. I look at it like I appreciate working with people who are ready to take a step, be accountable, and show up. Right. So ready, take a step, and be accountable. Ready means you realize that you're ready to make a change. That's the first step. Then taking action. Taking action sometimes is really saying, okay, I'm going to show up. I'm going to get coaching. I'm going to show up. I realize that there are things I want to accomplish that I can't now because of these saboteurs. And a third part is being accountable. So typically with coaching, and when I work with folks on their mental fitness, it's really going over and being mindful, but more importantly, taking action. What are you going to do between now and our next session? Because if we don't take action, then the coaching is just a conversation. Conversation. There's no accountability, and not everybody who comes for coaching is ready for coaching. Meaning that they may people may say, okay, I'm gonna hire a coach. I'm going to get a coach, and they feel once they have a coach, that's it. No, 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 no. You have to come. You got to be vulnerable. You got to be ready to be honest. You got to be ready to trust. And more importantly, you have to be able to develop empathy for what you're trying to do and empathy for yourself and for others. So to answer your question is, and quite, Mr. Prophet, I apologize. I think I strayed away from your question. Can you just say it again?
No, no, absolutely. Who mostly benefits from the work that you do? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I say, yeah, it's funny. I say the folks who are ready for a change show up, and can be held accountable. And so it's not so much the background of the person, and I would say it's not necessarily folks who feel frustrated. It's really folks who recognize that there is something about their mindset, something about their thoughts that's really preventing them from being their best self or preventing them from being able to reach their dreams. So
Mm.
anybody who comes to me, I look at them as an empty black board, and I want to see what they're going to put on the board as far as them being open, them sharing, and them being accountable. So there is no, well, when I say a perfect client, the perfect client are ones who are ready for change, who show up and ready to be accountable.
Absolutely. Now, you would also understand that fish don't see the water that they swim in, and neither can we see the air that we breathe. Now, if somebody might be feeling these triggers or seeing these saboteurs sort of happening or hearing these voices in their head, how can they maybe or what is it that is actually then happening in their lives so that they can start noticing that this is no longer just the
Yeah,
normal thing that I should be working on. I now need to reach out to somebody like Colin C. Thompson.
yeah. Well. The first thing is, um, we have this thing called the saboteur assessment. So the saboteur assessment is I want to say, depending upon, it's about a 5 minute assessment you take, which helps you identify what your saboteurs are. So as potential clients reach out to myself or other coaches for coaching, and a lot of coaching don't use the positive intelligence framework, which I use at times. But if somebody reaches out to me, it's usually somebody who, as I mentioned, recognizes they're ready for a change, right? They recognize that they can't make these changes on their own. So one of the first things I invite them to do is to take the saboteur assessment. And the saboteur assessment, the main result is it helps you identify which of the 9 saboteurs show up the most with you. Because when you have these inner voices, we have more than one inner voice. And it's very important to be able to label and understand the characteristics of that inner voice. So the assessment gives you a score on how often those 9 saboteurs show up. So that is the, the second step, which is very important. The first step is reaching out to me and saying, hey, let's get together. Let's talk about whether or not coaching will help the situation. Once they see the results, most people either say, wow, I get this. I have a controller in me. I have a pleaser in me. I have an avoider in me. Right? Most folks see this. I have a stickler in me. I have a controller in me. Right? And most folks absolutely see this. So being able to recognize and label these inner voices helps you then say, I better understand how they show up with me. Right? If I have a need to control, once you understand, in order for you to weaken the power of your saboteur, you must fully understand the saboteur. So you work on first understanding every aspect of the saboteur, how they show up with you, what scenario do they show up at work or at home? When they do show up, what emotions are you feeling? And then we work on the sage mindset. And the sage mindset, you can say, is our positive inner voices.
Absolutely. And obviously, with what you're saying, if you can't name it, you can't tame it. So if you are not quite sure what exactly is going on, you wouldn't have the emotional language to then be able to distinguish whether you're doing the right thing or not. So you mentioned 9 of these saboteurs. Are you able to name some of them so that maybe some people can be able to see them as they go along in their day to day?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to name them. And I'll give you a very brief definition. So we have the avoider. The avoider saboteur just means we avoid doing tasks that we think are going to be difficult. An avoider often creates us to be procrastinators, but avoiders also avoid difficult conversations. We don't want to talk about certain things. We think of peacemakers, right? If we talk about these things, people are going to get upset. Let's avoid the conversation. So avoid activities, avoid conversations. We also have the hyperachiever, and we sort of talked about this before. The hyperachiever is, I must accomplish more. And once I get this new accomplishment, I spend little time celebrating. I'm off to the next one. And I'm accomplishing because I want people to look at me and feel that I'm accomplishing things. I will not have any self worth unless I'm accomplishing. So you understand the danger of having that sort of mindset. We also have the pleaser. The pleasers want to say yes to people to make them happy, to have the people say, hey, you know what? You're a great person. You're a nice person. Even though in our heart of hearts, we don't want to say yes. We want to put their happiness above ours. However, at the end of the day, nobody is really taking care of our needs. So please have a habit of saying yes, working overtime, doing things they don't want to do because they want the person to think they're a team player. We also have the restless. And the restless is one that saboteur is very important because the restless, they must always stay busy. And one reason is staying busy because if we slow down, we think about things we don't want to think about. We think about where we are in life. We think about our loneliness. We think about our finances. But if we stay busy, we have no time to think about those things. So restless stays busy. Hypervigilant, hypervigilant saboteur, they worry about things that may not happen. They're very, very nervous. Well, and this is very big during COVID, if I go out, I'm going to get sick. So let me not go out. If I go after this job, I may fail and never try again in my life. So hypervigilant has a habit of worrying about things that may happen. Then there's the stickler. The stickler says everything must be done a certain way. It must be perfect. It's sort of like if you're working on a PowerPoint and you spend 3 hours working on the frame, right? The frame is the right color, and and it must be perfect. If it's not perfect, you worry, and you spend so much time worrying about very insignificant things that really people don't recognize. And the next one is the victim, and the victim feels like the whole world is against them. I didn't get this promotion because they prefer they prefer somebody else. Nobody helps me. So the victim has the whole world is against me mindset. We also have the controller. The controller is, hey, you know what? I must take charge. If I don't take charge, nobody else will. If I don't take charge, it won't be done the correct way. And a lot of our parents were controllers, quite frankly. And then the last one is the hyper rational. The hyper rational saboteur puts logic over emotions. Why do we need emotions? We need logic. And I'll tell you a very quick example. Somebody who has a hyper rational saboteur in them may be walking down the street and they see somebody on the ground bleeding from their head. And they may say, hey, look, get up to the hospital. At the hospital, go 2 blocks and go to the right, you'll find a hospital. Good luck, right? But they won't say, hey, how you feeling? Are you in pain? Right? Right? They're focused on logic. Logic said this person is hurt, they're in the hospital. But they won't say, hey, are you okay? Right? How do you feel right now? The emotional side of it. So those are the nine saboteurs. But the master saboteur that everybody, so these nine, some folks have high, some folks have low. But the master saboteur, which everybody has, is the judge. And we judge in three ways. We judge ourselves, we judge others, and we judge the environment. And the judge is the one who really evokes the most damage because once you're judging, you're blinded. We judge ourselves, and typically we judge ourselves in a negative way. And once we stop judging ourselves, we can then stop judging others or the environment. So I hope that's a quick breakdown of
Mm.
the nine saboteurs and the master judge.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for giving us that breakdown because then now it puts it into awareness. And I think some people were actually ticking themselves saying, wait a minute, I think I identify with this, I identify with this, and things of that nature. Now, obviously, if you're watching this right now, and I just want you to think about the voices in your head. Some of them that say maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe you're going to fail, or whatever it is. I think what Colin is trying to say is if you can eliminate that voice out and determine whether it's friend or foe, I think you would actually be able to, progress and actually move yourself forward. So if you've ever maybe experienced that inner voice in your head, just type yes in the comments so that we can see what sort of voices each and every one of us is experiencing out there. Now, obviously, Colin, this might just work for people that have had maybe a good upbringing, have went to really good colleges, have worked for really good companies like IBM, and can travel in and around different countries without being bothered by learning the language or the customs, and end up becoming a coach that is doing amazing things. Does this actually work on humans?
When you say it, what's it? What's it? When
Yeah.
you say it, what's it?
It does work
Okay,
on.
I mean, yeah, but you mean positive mental fitness? What's it? When you say it, what's it?
I mean, does all of this actually work on people? Because if I switch on the TV, somebody's talking about the world only has 3 days left. So you mean to say I can't be a victim in that scenario? Or I've always been told by my family or my cousins and everybody else that knows me that people like us would never amount to that sort of way of being. So that's why I'm just saying,
Yeah,
does this actually work on normal human beings?
it depends. And I say it depends because it's all about normal human being, right? There are, I mean, if you think about what a normal human being is, it's flaws. It's flaws. It's expertise. That's a normal human being. So when we say normal human being, I don't know. It depends. I mean, it doesn't work for everybody, right? Just like theology isn't for everybody, right? So this framework, this approach, the coaching, it's not for everybody. It works for, I would say, works for all flawed human beings, and all flawed human beings are also normal human beings. So yeah, it works, but it takes work. I've been doing this now with a focus on mental fitness, positive intelligence, for about almost 7 years. So I've learned that it takes time. We have a 7 week program, and when you go through the program, you're not then done. It's not done. If you go on a 7 week diet, at the end of that 7 weeks, you're not done. You can't go back to eating like you did before, right? You have to maintain this for life. So does it work? It works if you work it. Just like
Mm,
most things in life, it works if you work it.
absolutely. Now, if somebody is called upon to say, maybe let me do the assessment, let me see, what Colin C. Thompson has in store, where can they go on the internet to maybe get started to see if this is a fit for them?
Yeah, so they can take the assessment at OLIGYE.com. That's OLIGYE.com/saboteur-assessment. And that's a mouthful. So hopefully you have that in your notes, but OLIGYE.com/SABOTEUR dash assessment. ASSESSMENT. Now, one quick thing, go to OLIGYE.com and just send me a message. There's several links there on how to take the assessment there. So OLIGYE.com, and you can find your way.
Absolutely. I'll definitely put that link or those links in the show notes so that people can actually find their way there. And also, just so that it's easy for people to remember, Oligay, what was the inspiration behind this name, or what does this name actually represent?
So this is great. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was in university at Howard University, I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And when you cross and you become a member, you're given certain names. One of my aliases was Oli Gay, and I earned that name for the reason at Howard I was on a wrestling team, and Oli Gay comes from, it's an old African terminology when young African men went through manhood training, where they learned how to become men. They left that day a boy, and when they came back weeks later into the house, they were men. Even to the mother, they were now men. And part of that training is learning how to hunt, learning how to hunt, learning how to build. There was a old head there named M.E.D.I.A who taught them how to fight. And back then, fighting was done through wrestling. There was no boxing. It was done through hand to hand combat. And because I was a wrestler, I was given that name. My fraternity brothers recognized that in addition to me just being a wrestler, I was always about teaching, as I mentioned before, helping folks understand you have no governor to what you can accomplish. So based on those two things, I earned the name Oli Gay. So I started my coaching business. I said, what better name than a coach, a trainer, right? A coach, a trainer who is also what Oli Gay represents. So Oli Gay represents um, training and coaching, which is what I do.
I think it's actually well fitting, and I don't know if you had actually realized where it actually fits into this whole thing. You see, what you're talking about is akin to a rite of passage where, kids say 17 or 16, 17, mainly for boys, 13 to 15 for girls. You're sort of called in by the village elders, and then they tap you on the shoulder, and then they say, it's your turn to lead. And throughout the week or so, you start learning how to cook, how to, for women, how to, look after the family and everything else that is required for an adult female to do. And for the guy, like you said, the hunting, the fighting, the protecting of the family, and everything else that comes along with it. And when you come back, yes, that is that sort of transition, and you no longer are throwing tantrums or spitting the dummy
Mm-hmm.
like a kid, and it's somewhat of a pattern break that you are elevating yourself into adulthood. And it's kind of akin to what it is that you're taking people through, because if people are not able to name or see the things that are actually stopping them and blocking them from being functioning adults, and people that can be of service to the society, Oligay is coming in as that coach that is taking them to the other side. I don't know what you think about that sort of tidbit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oligay and myself is the coach that takes them to that next level, that next level. And again, I go back to improving their lives. Right? You can say this prepare them for their next chapter in life, their next level. We're always going up. We're always trying to reach more. So it definitely is part of the reason why I chose that name. But I never heard it defined as great as you just did. So thank you for that, because now that opens up so many ideas for me. So thank you for that.
Well, absolutely. Now, you did mention that you want to take people to the next level, to the next chapter. And now that you've taken us into your world, what's next for you? What are you working on that you are taking to the next level, to the next chapter, that we can also celebrate and be happy about, having met you this particular moment in our journeys?
Yeah, Mr. Prosper, thank you for that question, because this is where I want to talk about something really quick that is very important to me. So last year, um, I came upon an opportunity to start what I call a crusade. And my crusade is to have an impact in the lives of so many people. I call it Impact 14. And it started when a colleague of mine, a good friend of mine in Singapore, who his business is to draw images, draw images based on life lessons. And I was so moved by when I saw his images. I spent some time posting his images and asking people what their thoughts were. And there was one image where you see, if you play billiards or play pool, you'll see how you have all the balls in a triangle, all the balls in that triangle, and you have a cue ball, and the cue ball will then be hit, and if you hit it the right way, all the balls move. So I made a video where I said, I want you to look at what this cue ball does, and in there, I counted 14 balls. Right? I challenge you to have an impact in the lives of 14 people. So from that day, I decided I personally wanted to start a movement, a crusade, where I'm looking to impact the lives of 14 people. I call it Impact 14. And that was last June. And I'm happy to say that now I have impacted positively the lives of three people who I work with, and to make an impact based on what they need. So it may be mentoring, it may be advising, it may be listening and supporting. It depends on what their needs are. And this is something I feel very passionate about. And it's not tied to coaching. What I mean by that is It's not a pay for service sort of thing. Now they may need coaching, but everything is pro bono. There's no fee, no charge. My only requirement is once you have been impacted, you then must impact at least one more person. I would love if you did 14, but some people it's very difficult. So that is a mission that I'm very focused on. Impact 14, and I hope your listeners will always think about not always, but think about whose life can you impact. And if you think you don't have anybody in your life who you can impact, do a better job listening. Your friends, your family, they're talking to you. They need help, right? If you see somebody who needs help, ask them, how can I be of service? How can I help you? Impact somebody in your life starting today.
Absolutely. And I quite like this because you can easily break it down to just impacting one person for the first fortnight of every month. And before you know it, it could actually just become that ripple effect that you can be, do, and have that sort of happier existence for not only for yourself, but for those that are around you. Now, Colin, I can't thank you enough for the time that we've had this conversation today. I mean, your life story and your experience have so much value, and I'm glad we came full circle to, what you actually then named your business and the thing that you're actually working towards to help others be, do, and have a happier existence. So thank you so much for taking us on this journey today.
Yeah, that is my pleasure. And if your audience does want to get a hold of me, they can also reach me at www.colincthompson.com. COLINC Thompson, THOMPSON.com.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes so that people can actually click through and get to know what it is that you're doing. So for those that are watching right now, please help me thank Colin C. Thompson yet again, because I think today we actually explored something really powerful. And it's the idea that success without that mental fitness can actually just lead to chaos. It's just, what they say, empty vessels make the loudest noise. But with the right tools, that chaos can actually be honed into clarity that will help others be, do, and have a happier existence. And I can't wait to see what people will do with the information they gathered today. So check out the links in the show notes and be sure to follow Colin C. Thompson and never miss also an episode from the Online Prosperity Show once again. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see what you do with this. Bye for now.